Before we begin, please note, the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any affiliated organization. The content provided is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice. We encourage listeners to conduct their own research and consult with relevant professionals before making any business or career decisions. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the first episode of Science Warriors, the quest for operational excellence. I'm your host, Adel Hameed, and I'm thrilled to have you here as we explore the strategies, tools, and stories that drive success in organizations. This podcast is dedicated to uncovering the stories of the hidden generals, leaders in operations, data science, and engineering who bring scientific rigor to solving business challenges and driving innovation. In this inaugural episode, we're diving into OKRs, which stands for Objectives and Key Results. This powerful framework has been instrumental for organizations like Google, Intuit, and the Gates Foundation, helping them achieve focus, transparency, and lasting success. Designed for fast-paced, complex environments, OKRs are especially impactful for science-driven organizations. What I mean by science, as I discussed in the preview of this episode, or of this podcast. Organizations, when they get into implementing repeatable, scalable initiatives or projects, they have to look at things from a scientific approach. They have to disintegrate and break down the processes and the tests and the pilots that they run as scientists. For example, I had a previous experience where I decided to remove the phone numbers from our customers because we're targeting a mass market and we've been investing in self-service. And that by itself required a few tests before we go and remove the phone numbers. So this is what I mean by a scientific approach. It's not random, it's planned, and it's based on data. Before we dive into today's discussion with Omid Akhavan, let's take a closer look at why OKRs are such a valuable tool for operational excellence, including turning around projects as well. The OKR framework was first developed by Andy Grove at Intel and later popularized by John Doerr, who introduced it to organizations like Google. He's also written a book called Measure What Matters and also written an article which I'll be referencing here in this introduction. So as the article outlined, the Harvard Business Review article, it's titled How VC John Doerr Sets and Achieves Goals. OKRs consist of two simple components. That's what's mentioned in the article. OKRs, of course, the first O stands for objectives, which define what you aim to achieve, and key results, which provide measurable milestones for tracking progress. So key results, they're basically outcomes and deliverables. This simplicity makes OKRs a practical yet highly effective way to align teams around a shared goal. You get them to integrate and interlock their goals, their deliverables, their targets, where you eliminate the probability or reduce the probability of silos taking place within the organization. Because if their objectives are not aligned and the key results are not aligned, the outcomes are not integrated with each other, then most likely you'll have a silo within the organization where every team, they believe that their work is more important than anyone else's work, and then depending on the influence of that team, you see them getting more resources, and then it's like having a table where the legs are not even. So OKRs make sure that every department is aligned, which in my view feels like having a table with all the legs are even. So one of the most important aspects of OKRs is transparency. By making objectives visible across the organization, OKRs foster accountability and collaboration. This approach ensures that everyone understands how their contribution fits in the bigger picture. That means they understand what the vision is, what the company is trying to do, and how they can succeed, and how their work contributes to the success of the organization. That means they also know how they can succeed in contributing to that bigger picture. This is a critical element in tackling kinds of challenges often found in bigger organizations that are growing very quickly, that are scaling up, expanding internationally, And then you've got new hires, they come with their own cultures. That by itself creates like a natural force that goes against the structure and the alignment and harmony. So OKRs naturally helps you build that structure and make sure that that knowledge, that same culture gets transferred into those new offices, the new branches. I'll leave that discussion for Omid. He will be touching on this in more details. Another defining feature of OKRs is something called stretch goals. This is mentioned in Doer's article, where stretch goals are also referred to as moonshots, which challenge teams to think beyond incremental progress and push towards transformative breakthroughs that basically turns around the company's performance. So I suggest and I encourage you to read the book, read the article when you can, or look for the summary of the book somewhere online on YouTube. For science-driven organizations, the mindset aligns closely with the iterative nature of experimentation and discovery, where bold hypotheses and data-driven adjustments are essential to achieving meaningful results. It's all about experimenting, learning, even if you fail. It's like there's something called A/B testing as well. You test two possible outcomes or possible approaches where you change the lever and then you conclude why it worked, whether it worked or not. Now, this is the simplified approach to it. In reality, you've got many variables. It's like decoding what's the optimal way or the optimal approach that you need to follow towards optimizing a certain process or achieving your goal. So that's another benefit of OKRs as well. It makes things a bit more measurable. And also, I won't touch on this, on KPIs within this episode, but also when you're looking at OKRs and KPIs, they're two different things, but they're interlocked, they're interconnected. OKRs amplifies the benefits of using measurements or KPIs. I'll leave that for another episode, but that's one thing I need you as the audience to think about as well. How that happens as you listen to the interview with Omid. Another thing as well that I'd like to highlight is this approach is not built only for large organizations. It works in startups, scale-ups, and established corporations. Maybe the approach is a bit different because the cultures are a bit different. The flexibility is varied between organizations. So let's talk about Omid Akhavan before we start the interview with him. Omid Akhavan is the founder of Lucid Outcomes and a highly respected OKR coach with over 15 years of experience, helping organizations achieve operational clarity and alignment. He has worked with more than 100 companies across industries like health tech and ride sharing, training over 2,000 executives and professionals to adopt OKRs and other performance frameworks. Omid's expertise has transformed organizations from task-focused teams to ones driven by results. You have to keep in mind, OKRs is all about results, and Omid will be talking about that in more details. What sets Omid apart is his ability to adapt OKRs to unique needs of both startups and corporations. His practical approach ensures that organizations can integrate OKRs effectively, even in fast-paced, high-pressure environments, making him a trusted advisor for leaders looking to optimize their operations. In today's episode, Omid will share strategies for implementing OKRs, setting ambitious yet achievable goals, and overcoming challenges unique to transformational teams. He will also share some tricks and some of his beliefs based on his experience, where you can prevent certain mistakes in implementing OKRs. Because of course, if you go unprepared and implement OKRs, most likely it will fail. Whether you're exploring OKRs for the first time or refining an existing system that you have implemented previously, Omid's practical advice will provide actionable steps to enhance operational excellence. Omid, thank you again for joining us today and for accepting this invite. And I'm really curious to learn more and hear more about your stories. And so let's go ahead. Please give us an introduction about yourself. And then from here, I've got a list of questions, but again, nothing formal. we're just having a discussion as if we were in a cafe. And I'd like to learn more about what you've been working on, especially applying and specializing in implementing OKRs as a science warrior.
Sure.
Please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Adel. And I'd like to say hi to the audience. And I hope that this session would be beneficial and joyful for people. So, my name is Omid. I'm originally from Tehran, Iran, but I moved to US like many others in my 20s. I studied a master's degree in industrial engineering at Arizona State University, and then started working at IBM. Then became a US citizen and all that, but I'll get to that in a moment. So before I moved to the US, because I was studying industrial engineering, and at the time, Renault, the automotive company, which is basically present in the whole, I think, region and many parts of the world except the US and Canada. So Renault basically was establishing a new, I would say, new office and presence, and they were bringing a very popular model called Logan, like people know it by Dacia Logan, Renault Logan, or the project code was L90. So I was hired basically right after the university when I graduated from Bachelor of Science in Industrial Engineering. I joined Renault, and my task was to understand how Renault globally does production planning, scheduling, and how the logistics work. And then implement it, customize it, and implement those processes in Renault there in Iran, and working with different plants and suppliers and all the logistics partners, etc. So it was a really, really good experience for me, and I progressed very well there. And I got to learn all about automotive industry, of course, logistics, and basically how to pull off a huge like business process implementation and improvement project. And then at some point, when the car was really ready to be produced and the groundwork was done, I decided that, okay, it's time for me to move on, and then basically moved to the US to study my master's degree. And since I'm a very practical person, I'm not academic at all. So I decided to pick a master's program, which were only like 3 semesters. It didn't require a thesis. So I finished that, and then right off the bat, I was employed by IBM. But I went to their management consulting division, or they call it IBM Global Business Services, North America, but then it has branches underneath it. And there was a very interesting rotational program at the time. So I was lucky enough to get to that program. So I learned all about, management consulting and workshop facilitation, training, project management, etc. Got a lot of certificates at that point, like PMP, ITIL, and later on. So basically, I was a strategy and transformation consultant, and I was assigned to different projects, both internally, like we were helping internal teams in IBM, and also IBM's external clients. But I really, like, my passion was operational excellence. And I know it's very related to science barriers, as you put it. And I loved, just process improvement, etc. And because of my background in the automotive, I was familiar with lean concept and lean manufacturing. So I basically transferred myself into a group in IBM, which were doing Lean Six Sigma in North America. But the interesting part was, because IBM was in the IT space, mainly, and we were working with a lot of, IT teams in companies like, I don't know, Intel and Google and Verizon, DirecTV, and many others. We had to basically translate all those concepts and tools which were applicable to manufacturing, production, operations, to basically intangible stuff like data, like use cases, processes that people actually don't see. Because when you go to a factory plant, it's very easy. You see the waste, you see how material flows. But in the IT domain, or in the field of many tech startups that are doing online businesses today, it's much, much harder to basically apply those principles. So that was a really good experience for me. And I learned coaching there. It was, I don't know, more than, I think it was like 15 years ago, where I learned coaching, the basic skills. And then I became I was certified as a lean coach, and then I was certified as a lean master. So I really did very well in terms of that. And I also got my Six Sigma Black Belt certification. And then after some time working there, again, I felt it's time for me to move on. And at the time, I decided to move back to the region and I started working as a freelancer. So that was a big contrast. I was working in a huge corporate, and at the time, IBM was like, in terms of brand value, it was, I think it was Coca-Cola, then it was IBM. Like right now, it's Apple and Nvidia, etc. At the time, it was a big deal, but anyway, I decided that I want to work freelance. And then I started to work with tech startups and IT companies as a freelancer, doing consulting, coaching, and training, and mainly on operational excellence, business process improvement management. And gradually I shifted to performance and especially projects related to KPIs and a strategy. And then back in, I guess it was 2017 or 18, when the like major wave of OKRs picked up in the world, I decided, hey, this is right for me, and I will explain why. So at the time, I went online like many others. I read some books and articles, but I felt, hey, I need some practical knowledge. And then I started looking for like the best OKR coaches in the world, and I was lucky enough to get connected with Ben Lamort. He is the founder and president of OKRs.com. He's based in San Francisco. And Ben, as he puts it, is the most experienced OKR coach in the world because he started OKR coaching very early, like around 2010 or 11, when basically there was nothing about OKRs in the world. It wasn't like an industry. There were no books as such, etc. So I asked Ben, hey, can you, coach me, mentor me? And he, luckily, he had a certification program. I went through that. I got my certification. I think I was the second or third person who received the certification from OKRs.com as an OKR coach. And then because of my background, because I had worked in the MENA region and also, with European companies, and I wanted to be in the EMEA region, we partnered up with each other. And basically I was OKRs.com representative in the EMEA region, and the projects, in this region were assigned to me. And during that time, I was lucky enough to again work with great companies such as Careem, which of course ExxonMobil, Slack. So all over the world, I would say, all continents, small to large, different across industry. And then again, after 4 or 5 years, I decided, okay, it's time for me to move on and basically establish my own company. And the name is Lucid Outcomes. And the mission of Lucid Outcomes is to empower organizations to define and achieve lucid outcomes. And lucid means very clear and crisp and understandable. And as like we can talk about this later in the podcast, like the world is really moving towards an outcome-based mindset. And that's why I picked Lucid Outcomes. And then since then, I have been working with many great companies, helping them either implement OKRs for the first time or resolve their challenges, relaunch it, improve it, etc.
Excellent. Thank you so much for this introduction. It's exciting going from manufacturing to IT
Yep.
because I can relate to what you're saying. I've been through a similar journey as well. There is a lot to learn from manufacturing because it's just by nature, it's an older industry. Thank you for this intro.
Yeah, and I think I would like to add that what like the interesting part is that nowadays, like tech startups only deal with online and digital stuff. Okay. And I have seen many folks who wanted to launch something which involved operational, like physical operations, and they failed because they underestimate the complexity of physical operations. But for example, when you work with companies like Careem or like Kafu, or like I've worked with Zeiss, these companies have either like physical products or physical operations, like in terms of Kafu, which is in like fuel delivery. So they have to purchase it, they have to store the fuel, and they have their own trucks and they have to deliver. So it is very complicated when you go to the streets and then you have physical operations. But in contrast, for example, I've worked with like a health tech company or fintech company. They are all digital. everything is very different. So I would say experience-wise, I'm very lucky to be able to, to have the experience working in both operations and digital sector. So that opens a lot of doors for me because practically I can work with most companies. I have also worked with public sector in California. That was a very different experience. Everything is different in the public sector. But I would like to tell the audience that OKRs can be implemented practically in any organization, whether it's public sector, private sector, whether it's tech, whether it's not tech, it is logistics or manufacturing, it's energy, it's NGO. Anywhere that there is an organization, you can have OKRs and KPIs and business processes, etc.
Excellent. This is really good. Logistics as well. That's another thing. I believe you mentioned manufacturing. You mentioned the software industry, but also supply management, which is like managed by both, right? So there is the physical element to it, and then it goes up in complexity, especially when, for example, DHL, how do they manage all of the deliveries?
Yep.
But again, coming back to the main topic here, it's at least this is the focus of this discussion as well, is OKRs. Why are OKRs important? How does it serve me as a leader, whether I'm in the middle management, top management, or even as an employee that's delivering the value to the customer? How does that serve me? How much clarity does it add to me as well? So
Sure.
I'd like to learn more about you. This is a very deep topic, which I believe, yeah, please take us through it.
Yeah, of course. First of all,
Share with us your love with
yeah.
your love story with the OKR. Where did it start?
Okay, that's a great question actually. Where this started? Okay, so let me provide a brief history into OKR. So OKRs were actually invented in Intel. Like many people think it was in Google, but it was actually invented in Intel by Andy Grove, who was the CEO at the time. I think in 1980s, and he wrote the book, The High Output Management, and he wrote something about OKRs in it. So like people can't find it, but it's obviously very old. Then there was this guy, John Doerr. He learned OKRs in Intel from Andy Grove, and then he's a great, tech investor, of course. And he pitched it to Google founders, I think, in 1999. Apparently, Google had like 40 people at the time. It was basically small. And I think if people search it, they can find I have seen the presentation. It's black and white, very old style. But then Google adopted it, and since then, Google has been using OKRs as one of their major frameworks. But OKRs stayed inside Google for many years. Here and there were some adoptions, but I wouldn't say it was like widespread, like KPIs, for example. Okay. And then there is one person from Google, Rick Clow, and he published a YouTube video, I think in 2011 or 2013, around that time, and talked about OKRs and how they're applying it in their sector in Google. And that video went viral. And he himself was surprised. Afterwards, he says, like I slept and I woke up the next morning. I said, there's so many views, it's gone viral. And many companies started implementing OKRs based off of that 1 hour video, which was a huge mistake. And like mostly they failed. And then Rick Clark explains in Twitter, he tweets later on, and I have seen the tweets and said, I never thought that companies would try to adopt OKRs based on my video. And that video was not intended for practical purposes, implementation, etc. So that was basically, we can say, the first wave or minor wave of OKRs. And then it started basically going through Silicon Valley and, of course, companies like Twitter itself, Spotify, and I don't know, LinkedIn, many others started adopting it. But the big wave or the major wave happened in 2018 when John Doerr published a book called Measure What Matters. And that book became a bestseller. And I personally have worked with many companies whom, when I asked, okay, why did you decide to implement OKR? The answer was because our CEO or somebody in our C levels read that book and we thought it's a great thing to be done. And so we want to do it, which is not
a great. Yeah.
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 The book, like theoretically, it's a great book, but practically everyone in the OKR community, we all believe that for implementation and practical reasons, it's not the best book. It has some examples which is in contrast with the best practices of implementation that we know today. So I advise the readers to be mindful of that. If you really need to deeply understand OKRs, the theory, the philosophy behind it, and how it went, kind of viral, etc., that's a great book. And it also talks about CFR, conversation, feedback recognition, which is also great. But anyway, there are so many practical books right now. One of which is called the OKRs Field Book, which Ben Lamort wrote it. I was there when he was writing it, and I contributed to it. I was reviewing, providing feedback, etc. So that is a super practical book. It's basically an OKR book for the OKR coaches, and that's why it's really.
Yeah, I'll share the link later if you don't mind at the description for the audience as well. So as we're going forward, yeah, please
So,
continue. Go ahead.
and then after 2018, so again, many companies started using it. But I think what made OKRs an industry was actually the software companies, because a lot of SaaS companies popped up, and they started providing OKR, like a dedicated OKR software tool, and some of them raised millions of dollars of funding, and then like they were startups themselves, but that was their product. And then some HR or strategy software started providing OKR modules, and these software companies started producing tons of content to basically attract leads and users. And then in parallel, OKR like training, certification, consulting, coaching, etc., picked up. And now as we are talking, there's a whole industry around OKRs, and like many thought that maybe it is just a fad and it will disappear, but it has been growing, and companies have been adopting it consistently. So still I see the OKR space as something that will stay, and it's growing. One more thing I
Amazing.
wanted to add, you mentioned why I love OKRs and why I decided. I think for me personally, OKR basically is the point where all of my skill and background meet. And the reason I'm saying that is because, like, in order to be an OK expert or OKR coach or consultant, you really need to be very good at management consulting, coaching, training, project delivery or management, workshop facilitation, a lot of soft skills. It's actually a very complex role if you want to do it properly. And then in terms of hard skills, you really need to know all about how businesses work, business models, strategy, performance, metrics, KPIs. And I had all of these, in my experience or toolbox. And then I figured, wow, this is really what I should be focusing on. And again, like the wave was picking up in 2018. So I saw it as an opportunity to basically change the course of my career. And OKRs is all about focus. And I decided to focus only on OKRs. I would say since 2018, like 98% of my projects have been only on OKRs. I mean, sometimes, of course, you need to help clients as well with KPIs, strategy, performance, but like my core offering has been OKRs. So that is how I got there. Before I explain what OKRs are and what benefits they provide, do you have any questions about?
That's great. Yeah, please go ahead. That's the next question. How does it benefit the organization, me as an individual, as a team member, as a leader?
So
Yeah.
let me explain what OKRs are, like my definition, like I'm saying my definition because, like it or not, there is no standard or single definition for OKRs. There is no standard book. There is no institution that we say, okay, this is institution. Like for example, for project management, there is the PMBOK and there's the PMI Institute. Like then you have a Scrum. These are basically standards, and like they're lower Six Sigma. Okay, this book and this book are the references. For OKRs, we don't have that. Therefore, there are various definitions, approaches, etc. So my personal approach is, first off, we call OKR a framework, like not a tool. It's really not a tool. It's really a framework. It's an agile framework, and I can explain later why we call it agile, which does prioritization and goal setting, helps with the strategy execution, performance measurement and improvement, and of course helps with growth or scalable growth. Okay, that is the overview and the benefits. As you mentioned, like top two, I would say is focus and clarity. Okay, and on your top strategic priorities for the short term, and like short term, it's typically 1 quarter, but over the years, we have been seeing clients moving to, for example, 4 month cycles. So instead of 4 cycles, like 4 quarters, they have 3 cycles, each is 4 months. Anything longer than that is not really recommended unless there is a good reason to have a 6 month cycle, or some have like a 1 year cycle. Anything over that is really rare. Okay, so like I would say mostly it's 3 months or 4 months. And then alignment, I think, is the next key benefit. And OKRs help the companies align vertically and horizontally. Vertically means that it helps all the teams and departments align with the company's strategies and mission and vision. And then horizontally means that different teams and departments will align with each other. And then OKRs done right, implemented right, they can provide a huge benefit, which is cross-functional collaboration. They can easily make that collaboration and basically avoid teams or departments becoming silos. Another important benefit is the ownership. And by ownership, I mean uh, anything done in OKRs would have someone accountable for it. So things don't get lost. You know where to go, you know who to contact, okay? Whether it's an objective or a key result. And also, you should have some actions or projects or initiatives attached to your OKRs. Initially, because OKRs are all about outcomes, some people were promoting the fact that okay, you should only have objectives and key results. Anything action related, it's out of the framework. Okay, but many clients fail because of that. Because once you set your targets or key results or outcomes, then you have to figure out how am I going to achieve those, and then you need action planning, you need project planning, you need resources, etc. So when we define those actions or initiatives, again, you have ownership of those. So like when I work with my clients, it's crystal clear who owns or is accountable for each of these. And of course, in all of them, you have some contributors, other people who contribute and play a part. And I would say, lastly, another thing that really makes OKRs great is its process. Like it's a cycle. Okay, so you have a cycle and you know how it works, and you keep doing it over and over every quarter, for example. And that cycle includes some weekly or bi-weekly check-ins. It includes a retro at the end of the cycle, and so you look back and then reflect on the cycle, and then you decide how you want to make improvements. You have lesson learned, and then you reset your OKRs basically for the next cycle. And then you have to be able to track and monitor your key results. So those check-ins are very critical because they keep your OKRs alive. You really don't want to take the set and forget approach where traditionally people were even before OKRs, like people were setting targets in the beginning of the year and not monitoring them, and then at the end of the year they would say, okay, where we are. But with OKRs, you want to be consistently be on top of your OKRs because they are your most important priority in that period.
Thank you for this explanation. What's the easiest way for me as an individual to keep track? Is there a tool that you advise? Should I use Excel? How often should I be checking my OKRs? And then what you've been saying is that I need to, once I highlighted or agreed on what the key results are, these are the deliverables, the outcomes.
Yes.
So I need to reverse engineer the activities, the
Exactly.
routines, which will be put on my calendar and my schedule with deadlines, with timelines. So it's a bit grows into complexity, and most people are not used to that. So what's your advice? Are there any tools, any place to start as an individual?
Yeah. So there are two things. Like like when you implement OKRs, okay, you're basically all. It's not like implementation of OKRs is not only about writing some objectives and key results and saying, yeah, we have done it and we put it on the wall. It is about first customizing the framework for every company, and then do a proper implementation and change management. So you will end up with a process. For example, you decide that, okay, like we have 8 teams and these teams will do bi-weekly check-ins. So yes, they have to put it on their calendars in advance to make sure that they have reserved time for those and everything. Okay, so this is really the core OKR process. But then each team, based on their key results and their action plans, they have to do proper planning as they do with any other type of action or project, and they have to basically execute on those, I would say. Okay. Now, regarding the tools, this is a great question. I have written blogs on it, etc. Um, First question: are there tools? Yes, there are great OKR tools out there. They have matured over the past 4 or 5 years. Some of them are geared towards small and medium companies. Some around larger organizations. Some are really enterprise level. Okay, so if you need a tool, it's there. A key advantage of these tools recently is the generative AI, right? So they are basically adding AI features and they're building AI into it, which can be very beneficial. For example, you're in a large organization, and then like somebody like a C-level say, "Hey, I need a presentation on the OKRs like tomorrow." Like you go into the tool, you click a button, assuming that you have done your check-ins and everything is updated. It will give you a presentation done. You don't need to create it. Or they can check the quality of your OKRs. Like there is a button, you click on it, it reads your OKRs and gives you suggestions. So these are great. Although I personally believe that it will kind of slow the learning process, because if the AI is doing it for you, it means that you don't really take OKR seriously. And I believe you should really know what you're putting in your OKRs, because it's the most important priority in the short term for you or for your company. So it really should come from you, not an AI. But anyway,
So yeah, please go ahead, continue. Yeah.
yeah. So, and of course, there are a lot of other great features, like they give you notifications, reminders, they have a feed, and then you can tag people easily. Some of them include some strategy or KPI modules, which come in handy. So, of course, there are many benefits to it. But the issue is that they tend to make OKRs complicated in a way that when you're implementing OKRs, it's a big change by itself. Okay, so if you want to introduce a software as well in parallel with it, so people have to learn the whole OKR, what it is, how to write it, etc., and then whole new software, different features, and it needs troubleshooting, support, etc. That's why we always recommend that companies start with the most simple tool, which is, as you said, is Excel. Uh, in terms of Excel, I actually recommend Excel Online. That's something that you can do real-time collaboration and it's shared with various people. And the alternative is, of course, Google Sheets. And like I would say, oftentimes, if my clients are okay with it, we use Google Sheets. The reason is that everyone knows how it works. It's very customizable. You can do whatever you want with it. Yet, because OKR's framework is very simple, and in terms of there's no complication in writing your OKR. Like it's not like accounting that you really need a software. You don't need complex calculations, and it's just content, right? Of course, if you have a tool and you're a huge organization and you have many systems, it can do integrations for you, etc. But like in many cases, it's as simple as just putting your content there. It's shareable with people. They can see it and they can actually do their check-ins in the Google Sheet, make updates, and they're good. And I've worked with many clients who initially thought that they should adopt the tool, but once they saw how simple and easy it is for everyone to work with Google Sheets for their OKRs, then they said we don't need it. Okay. My recommendation is that if you're a big organization and you have so many users that the spreadsheet is really not a solution, or you need some AI features, or you need some integrations, etc., yes, by all means, you can adopt a tool. Some, like, another, I would say, utilization or function for these tools is that some companies like to adopt, for example, an HR software, HRIS or HR management, whatever you call it, and then as a bonus, it has an OKR feature as well, or there's this strategy software, it has KPIs and OKRs. That is also another way you say, hey, I'm implementing this software for multiple reasons. It's not just an OKR software. So I would say, yeah, that's my insight on the tools. I rather not name any tools because I don't want to, make the audience biased. But there are great tools out there depending on your organization.
I respect that. I was about to ask you that question if you could recommend some tools, but people can Google it or ask ChatGPT or Gemini or any of these guys.
Actually, I think like I tried it once, and I think the AI tools are not really good at recommending the best OKR software, or at least it's not comprehensive. I don't know why, but if people Google it, yeah, there are there are various sites that list them, and there are reviews and everything, and they can of course request demos and understand what works best.
Let's spin it around and look at the decision making criteria. What are the features that you advise us looking at when we choose an OKR software?
Well, in terms of software, okay, it really depends on how you are going to implement OKRs. For example, if you really want to go by the book and definitely do it quarterly, and you don't foresee that you might change it, you don't need to look for like a horizon customization feature. Okay. But with many clients, maybe they want to do 4 month cycle, maybe they want to do a 3.5 cycle, maybe they want to do like a dual cycle. In those cases, for example, you have to look for a feature which enables you to define dates for your cycle, exact date. Like, we want to start our cycle from maybe January 15 until such date. I think the integration with strategy and KPIs is very useful, because OKR inherently is really connected with these two. So that would be a good benefit. Also, the AI features can be really helpful. I mean, if you're really adopting a tool, I would say it should be, nowadays, it should be really AI enabled. And then you have to look for simplicity. Again, one of the reasons OKRs is very successful is that it's very lightweight and very simple. So if you are looking for a tool that is doing, HR and a strategy and performance evaluation and bonus and everything, OKRs may really get lost into it, right? So I would really keep OKRs in the strategy domain. So, connection with the strategy and KPIs could be a benefit. If you're a big organization, like integration could be integration with various systems, ERPs, etc., or like things like Zapier. Being able to customize the fields, I think, is very important, because again, I'm a big fan of customization. And for example, you have this objective and you decide that, hey, I want to have two fields. One field explains how this objective is related to company strategies, and I want to type it. It's not just drawing a line, because the line, like most software do it, you can just drag and drop and it creates line. But maybe you want to explain why it is connected, or maybe you want to explain why this objective is a top priority. Okay, maybe you want to have not only one field for the owner. Maybe you need two fields. Like in Google Sheets, I personally always create two fields. One is the owner or accountable who leads the, let's say, key result, and the other field is the contributors who really contribute to it. Could be teams or people, etc. So there are a lot of little things here and there that could really come handy in the future. This is another reason, Adel, why we recommend companies not to adopt a tool on day one. Because once you do OKRs for, let's say, 1 or 2 cycles, then you really understand how it works. You have customized it, you have fine-tuned it. You know exactly how you want OKRs to be run and be operational in your company. Now you have all the data you need in order to adopt the best tool for you, right? And then again, depending on those, you will have to look for features. Of course, I think the check-ins, being able to check in easily. I don't know, the reminders, maybe the feed, and also being able to record maybe lesson learns is beneficial. I personally believe that as of the last updates I saw on the tools, I think none of them are really good at action plans or basically on the execution part of the OKR. So they have tons of feature for objectives and key results. Some of them have like a very basic module. You can write some tasks in it, but then writing some tasks and maybe even owners is not enough. You need deadlines. You need contributors. Maybe you need other fields that is used in task or project management. So I think that's another thing that you can look for, because if you have all of these like objective key results and action plan integrated in one place, it's a huge benefit. Other than that, you can of course take it elsewhere. You can use Google Sheets, or you can use, I don't know, Asana, right, or many other. I don't know. Some do it in Jira, some do it in ClickUp. You can do it wherever you want, but if they are linked and integrated, it would be of course smoother.
Excellent, excellent. I got you finally to name some software brands
They're not
also.
OKR. Those are like general software people use in the IT space, where you can also put your OKRs, but none of them are dedicated OKR tools. Although there
Yeah,
are
yeah.
add-ons for, let's say, for Jira, and I think Jira, like Jira for sure, I know there are OKR add-ons, and maybe in, I don't
Mm,
know, Monday.com or others, maybe they have some add-ons. But I really think if you
yeah,
really want to do properly, just go with the proper OKR tool, not just an add-on. Otherwise, Google
yeah.
Sheets is probably a better choice.
It is really about the discipline as well. For
Yes,
me, I believe in that same philosophy. Whenever you implement a new process, a new approach, it's all you have to. It's the same concept behind active learning, right? You need
yes,
to take notes, you need to highlight, you need to write summaries so that you understand what you're talking about. And it makes absolute sense, the advice that you're giving on doing it manually first before
yes,
choosing the software, because you'll make lots of discoveries. And our brains, the neurons, they get connected, they get sparked when you interact with it before you actually make. Because the other way around, it's like you choose a software and then your thinking, your decisions will be biased towards the software, and it might not be right for you. And
100% true. That
yeah,
happens all the time. Yeah, I agree. And one
yeah.
thing I
So
also,
yeah, please go.
you mentioned discipline, and I wanted to add something about discipline. So I know like most of your audience are probably in the MENA region, and based on my experience, like the three reasons why OKRs like fail in this, specifically in the MENA region. One is that first off, uh, they're typically like the management style in this part of the world typically top down, right? And typically you have brilliant, C levels or top management, and that they really want to take control and just tell people how to do things. And OKR doesn't really work that way. You really need, in order to make people accountable, to engage them, to really maximize the benefits of OKRs, you need the bottom up approach as well. You need to give people some level of authority and autonomicity so that they can write and align their OKRs and work with you, etc. So that is one, like it's a cultural thing, I would say, that can hinder your OKR implementation or progress. Another thing is that in the region, like the companies are really big on training and certification, whereas, for example, in US, all they talk about is that reduce the training, reduce the training. We don't have time. Like they're at the two ends of a spectrum, based on my experience. So in US, they really want to squeeze the training part. Oftentimes, they really don't care about any like training certification or certification of attendance. But in MENA, many times people ask, okay, like when you work with us, do you provide a certificate for the people who attend? So that's the difference. And the issue on both ends is that in US, people are not trained properly. Even they are attending the training because they're so busy, they are multitasking. So typically they don't the training that they really need. On the other hand, in the region, people love the train, they fall in love with the training and the theory. But when it comes to execution, they're typically executing it poorly. Like they really need a lot of coaching, but they really don't foresee. They think if you train people, they will magically do great. Okay. And it doesn't matter who trains them, how much training you provide, approaches you pick for training. OKRs is something that is very practical and hands-on, and you really need coaching on it if you want to do it properly. Okay, so I think that's a key difference. I personally find the European companies at an optimal level. I really had a very balanced experience working with them in terms of the level of training and coaching, consulting that they need and they understand. And the third one, which is again very important, or maybe I would say the biggest reasons that companies fail, is keeping OKRs alive and sticking with the discipline. Okay, and by discipline, I mean that people should put priority on conducting their biweekly check-in. They should update the statuses. If something, if your confidence level is dropping on a key result, you have to raise a red flag. You have to, I don't know, do a deep dive. You have to escalate. So what I see in the region is that people get very excited in the beginning, even the leaders, the founders, etc. Right, everyone. They are very excited that they want to do it. They take photos, they put it on LinkedIn. They do this huge, like offsite training. Maybe everything is great, and I love it. Right, but then 2 weeks later, when you expect to do their first check-in, like 10%, 20% of the people do it. And then you reach out to the executives and say, hey, like OKRs will fail this way. People should really do this. And say, okay, we'll send an email. So they send an email, nothing happens. So you really, as as an external coach or consultant, you have some leverage and you want to get involved to an extent, right? So, you warn them, you say, hey, these are the consequences, etc. So basically, they drop the ball in terms of doing the execution of follow-ups and check-ins. And like typically the founders or C-levels are very active in the beginning, like in the training or setting OKRs, but they magically disappear afterwards. And I have done this for more than 15 years. Like you said, whatever you implement, you really have to stay on top of it. It's not like you implement it and it magically works forever. You really have to maintain it. Right? And I think that is one of the biggest reasons I personally see companies in MENA fail with OKRs. Again, like with Europeans, I found it really good. With US companies, they are typically so busy and overloaded that they sometimes don't have time to do it. Again, this is the differences I've personally seen between these three regions, at least.
Yeah, yeah. Just to highlight as well, the audience we have here they're more focused, or we're more focused on emerging markets, because emerging and developing markets or economies. Right. Because I believe that all of us in these regions, even though we're based in Dubai and we're integrated here with many of these cultures that come in from emerging economies and developing economies, we have similar problems. Yep. Right? We don't have the critical mass of talent. We don't have the critical mass of money. The infrastructure is still developing. So that naturally creates these challenges that you just spoke about.
Yeah.
And there is one final thing also I'd like to touch on before we end this episode is silos. You mentioned about closing silos, because silos is one of the causes of failure of any project. So how does OKRs resolve that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, I think it's one of the top five, if not the top three, it's one of the top five benefits of OKRs. But I wanted to add that, like, it's not something that only OKRs can resolve, right? Like, of course, like company culture and like how people generally work in a specific company. Of course, that is one very important thing. Okay. But I could say, for example, if you do your business processes right and you have, let's say, end-to-end business process owners, you're basically defining processes, account silos. So that is also helping with, breaking down the silos. But so there, like in order to really do well on closing down these silos and linking everyone, there could be various approaches that you should take maybe in parallel. Okay, but how OKRs help is that first off, with OKRs, we always tend to have like a cross-functional discussion. Like whenever I do my OKRs training, I make sure that, let's say we are, I mean, you can, with OKRs implementation, I always recommend to do a pilot, right? And generally you want to start with the top, like with the executive leadership, and then come down. Of course, you can do different types of pilots. You can pick only a few, I don't know, business units or departments. You can do various ways. But generally, you want to make sure that you are, when you're doing the training and coaching, at least in the beginning, it is cross-functional. People from different parts of the organization are there. So if they have concerns, if there are questions, etc., first off, they can learn and they can address it, and they can talk to each other. Like it seems very trivial, and okay, everyone should know it. Like people should talk in an organization, but what you find out is that in many organizations, different departments or business units, etc., don't know about each other's priorities or strategies or the outcomes they're after. Okay, so even if you like make sure that because of OKRs, there are some meetings that these people go into and talk to each other about their priorities, that's a big win. Okay, just by enabling them to talk to each other, and not just once, like maybe every month, etc. Another way of promoting cross-functional collaboration is that you can have, for example, an objective which looks like, I don't know, sales or marketing, for example, like you're increasing sale or something. Uh, but when you have key results, you can actually assign, for example, each key result to a different division or department. Okay, so basically by design, you have this set of OKR which maybe look like a sales or marketing OKR, but in the different key results are owned by different departments. So those have to really work with each other in order to achieve that objective. Okay. There is also the contributors part that I mentioned, and I think is very critical. And I was looking at the other day, one of the best, or maybe the best software, OKR software, and they don't have it. Like it's just the owner field. I think it's really, really important that you set contributors because, okay, maybe this looks like, for example, your key result is increasing the number of qualified leads, okay, or the conversion rate, whatever. It is not only like the marketing, it's not only the sales, it's not only the product. Like maybe these teams should work with each other so that you have a proper product, landing page, call to action, you have A/B tests, etc. Then the marketing should really get great traffic, and then the sales should provide great content and pitches so that you really can do the conversion. So basically, by listing different contributors to a single key result, you are essentially making it cross-functional. Then, if you want to be more advanced, you can actually create a virtual team or a squad made up of different people from different parts of the organization for that specific OKR cycle, right? So you say, hey, for Q1, we have these people, they will perform and execute this specific OKR, okay? And once that OKR is done, then that virtual team disbands. It doesn't mean that you're changing the org chart, right? Or assigning full-time stuff to people. It means that part of their capacity will be working together in this team. And this team, by definition, is a cross-functional team. So they are working cross-functionally. And lastly, I would say the leadership should create transparency. And luckily, I've been seeing this a lot, that the CEOs, the founders, the C-levels are quite comfortable with making the OKRs transparent throughout their organization, basically giving like a read access to everyone in the organization. So everyone can look at each other's OKRs and understand who is focusing on what are these teams' OKRs, where am I listed as a contributor, how they're contributing to mine. And lastly, I would say is the strategy. So if at the strategic level, you have a proper strategy, it's very clear, it's shared, etc., it by definition helps people understand that, okay, what has to be done, and it can unite them. And then when the time comes to write OKRs, they are basically aiming toward the same goals. They have like some common targets or outcomes or OKRs to work on. That would create a sense of cross-functional collaboration as well. I think it was a very good question, and there are many solutions to it, some of which I top of my mind was
Yeah, excellent. It's it's one of the key causes of dysfunctional behavior in companies. So every company has a bit of it, which I believe it's something that has to be tackled continuously. And it's not, there's no silver bullet to resolve that.
Picking up on that, so I
Mm.
wanted to say in OKRs, my last advice maybe to the audience, that OKRs seem to be very simple and easy. Okay, so I always tell in the beginning of all my workshops, like first slide is that OKRs are very easy to learn and understand, but doing OKRs is very complex and hard. It is not impossible. It just needs practice. It requires coaching. It requires iterations. You can't master it in the first cycle. It takes time, etc. So there is no hack to it. There is no silver bullet. There is no shortcut. You really have to go through a process and journey. And after 2-3 cycles, then you will really feel that, okay, now we are doing it properly. Now we are seeing the benefits. Now everyone really got a hold of it. Okay, so that is, I think, a very important consideration for anyone going into OKRs.
Excellent. Thank you for being so generous with your knowledge today with us. So just to summarize as well, what you're saying is that it's important, one important exercise or practice, to have interlocked targets that are connected to one deliverable between, for example, if you're delivering a certain value to the customer, or delivering a certain service, connect their KPIs and outcomes into one deliverable. That's one way of them sharing responsibility. So I appreciate your time so much, Omid, and for your generosity with us here.
Thank you.
And for people who want to follow you and learn more about what you do, I'll share with them the website, which is lucidoutcomes.com. And
Yep.
where else can they connect with you?
Yeah, they can, of course, find me on LinkedIn. They just search my name, Omid Akhavan. I'm sure you're listing it on this. I would be happy to expand my network, connect with people. If you have questions, I think LinkedIn is the best way to reach me. You can also go to my website and fill in the contact form. I will get back to you. And my email is also omid@lucidoutcomes.com, and would be happy to meet you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Just one last question, which is a general question, right? So, what's the one piece of advice you'd give to someone trying to apply science to solve real world problems? So, please go ahead.
Um, it depends on what you're saying, like what you mean by science. Can you elaborate a bit so I can better answer it?
So, science, you were talking about applying the concepts from
Yeah.
manufacturing into software.
Yes.
So that's a perfect example of using a scientific approach of solving a different problem with the same principles. I'm sure there are certain traps that you had to go through and you overcome. But what would be your advice to
Got it.
someone who is starting? Yeah, please
I
go ahead.
think the science part, or the harder skills or technical skills, it's something that you can definitely learn. Nowadays, with the AI, with the YouTube, with all these online courses, the content is there. So if there is something that you can, like as a science or as technical or harder skills, you can practically learn it very easily. Okay. But my advice is to pay attention to the softer skills and to the people part. Okay. I think, for example, still like anything that you want to do in an organization, let's say if you want to make a change or transformation or implement OKRs or strategy or business process, anything, right? You really have, at the end of the day, the core thing there is the people. Okay, so you really have to know how to work with people, how to influence them, how to motivate them, how to coach them, how to help them, how to support them. That's, I think, the key part which has been missing And it's getting harder and harder because the world and the big businesses are adopting a faster and faster pace. Everything is becoming more aggressive, and like people are just running all the time and they're super busy. So in order to grab someone's attention, and the attention span is like minimizing with social media and everything. So I think this is really the weakest link in the chain. Okay, the people part, the soft skills part, and then especially how to keep people motivated, especially the intrinsic motivation versus the extrinsic. So I would say, the science part, you can figure it out if you know how to, do anything, and you have certain level of maybe experience and IQ, etc. But the EQ and then how to work with people, I think that's really the most important part of making something successful. And I think that is still one of the biggest challenges today in all organizations all over the world, all sizes and industries.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Omid, and thank you for your time. I think we hit the 1 hour hard stop for us. And yeah, again, I'll be sharing all the details to the audience. And again, thank you for your generosity with your time and knowledge.
Of course, my pleasure. I had a really good time. I enjoyed our conversation. Looking forward to more conversations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
That wraps up today's episode of Science Warriors. A big thank you to Omid Akhavan for sharing his insights and knowledge on OKRs and how they drive clarity, accountability, and measurable success. Thank you so much for your support. If you found this episode to be useful, please make sure you subscribe, you leave a review, and share this episode with someone who could find this useful. You'll find the links to the resources and articles that I mentioned earlier, and Omid's profile as well will be shared in the episode description of this episode, in whatever platform you're watching. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep striving for operational excellence and innovation.